Welcome back to Advocacy in Action, where we highlight real strategies and insights shaping today's government affairs and advocacy programs. I'm Brittany Hanks with BIPAC, and today we're diving into a topic that many organizations are prioritizing right now: how to plan and execute effective fly-ins that actually are driving impact. So joining me today is Allie Gale, who brings great experience in building and leading successful fly-in programs. Allie, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, so I am the Equipment Leasing and Finance Association Vice President of Federal Government Affairs. I have been with the organization now coming up on 2 years, but prior to my time at ELFA, I represented the credit union industry and had various roles there. I was on their government affairs team, and then also served as their head of political and grassroots. So the nice thing is, when I came to ELFA, I had actually already been through the process of working on DC fly-ins, Hike the Hills, and no, it's been an exciting time being at ELFA, and I feel like for anyone who gets the pleasure of representing an industry and working on putting together these opportunities, it is beneficial, and it has been beneficial for me that I also came from the Hill. So I kind of understand what it's like on the other side. So prior to my private sector career, I worked on the Hill for a number of years. And so it's nice to have that 360 picture.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Allie. It's great to have you with us today, and we really appreciate you sharing your perspective. Let's jump right into our questions and go through all of your expert insight. What are the key elements that make a fly-in truly successful from both a logistics and an advocacy standpoint?
Well, there's this saying, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I cannot emphasize enough the amount of preparation that needs to go into these events, right? It's this wonderful opportunity to basically storytell and share the industry story with lawmakers. We start the process. Our fly-in takes place in May, and January, that first week of January, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, what is the speaker lineup going to look like? Do we have contracts in place with vendors that we typically utilize? And kind of building out what the timeline leading up to the fly-in should really look like. That way, right, the overall experience feels smooth and polished. And to your, to your question, measure for success, that those that we get to represent come in and walk away with the feeling like this was worth my time. This was, this is why we pay our dues to the trade association. This is why advocacy matters. And they walk away with this energized feeling. That's kind of how I've always looked at it.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful context, especially thinking about both the logistics and the outcomes altogether. Let's build on that a little bit. When it comes to the participants themselves, preparation can really make or break that experience. How do you prepare your participants, especially those that might be new to advocacy, to effectively be able to communicate their message to the lawmakers?
Yeah, it's funny too, because right, I would say I'm still early on in my career at ELFA, not even at the 2-year marker. So the industry that I'm representing, I lean on them so heavily for kind of deciphering our policy positions, given, a rule from an agency or a bill introduced on the Hill. But last year and this year, really, I've been focused on kind of creating a grounding for our policy. I call them our 3 pillars. That way, right, we have this lens of which we're looking out of. And then whether it's having direct asks about, signing on to HR 123, right? Or, whatever the bill number is, Senate Bill 123. It can kind of fall under those various pillars. This year is a unique year because Congress, I would say, it's not that there's not a ton going on. There's actually a lot going on, but from a legislative policy movement standpoint, there's been a uniqueness this year where I feel like we're in a very regulatory heavy environment. So the preparation that we're doing this year, right, we've created, like most groups, companies, organizations, right, we've created our leave behinds, and we're right now in the process of, we've sent over the content to make it nice and glossy and pretty. But first of all, we set up a webinar with our members about, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks out of the conference. It's a live webinar reviewing the content that we're going to go over. So it's available to those that have registered for the conference. And then the nice thing at ELFA, which is so funny, it's a little different than what I did at my last organization. We have what we call team captains. So for scheduling, each group has a team. No member office on the Hill is visited twice, which is, I think, kind of unique. Now, mind you, we're kind of a more niche boutique trade association in that regard, just given like the varying types of members that we have. But I really have truly enjoyed the fact that we have these team captains. And so we'll have a captain's call about 3 weeks out, right after the webinar. And each team captain basically gets another rundown of what the leave behind is going to be, what we're going to focus on throughout our conversation with each member. And then they set up individual meetings with their team. The teams are anywhere from 4 to 6 attendees. So they're smaller, intimate groups, and then they break out and have their own individual meetings to go over the material, who's going to introduce the group, like kind of what the run of show for the meeting is going to be. Which meetings will the point person be for being the constituent, and kind of relaying, once again, right, what we're focused on for the fly-in. So I actually feel like the system that we've built out with the live webinar and then the team captains and then their individual group meetings, by the time people show up, they feel really kind of rehearsed with everything. And then before we send them off to the Hill, we have our big breakfast. We usually have a speaker in the morning, but we set up the breakfast so each team is seated at the same table. So if there are any like last minute, know before you go, kind of lingering questions, or, like, hey, like I'm going to talk about this deal that we've done in the state and like the overall impact of the state's economy. Like if they want to kind of rehearse that story and make sure, like, what do you think? Like, is this a great example for kind of sharing and highlighting the impact our industry has on the district or state? I think, like I said, kind of at that point, everyone feels very like, okay, I'm ready. Let's get in there. Let's rip the Band-Aid. Let's go, which is wonderful.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really smart to have the captains. I knew that was something that y'all did that I haven't seen in many other fly-ins that BIPAC's assisted with. So I think that that's great advice for people and can really especially help those first-time advocates that are going and might not know the flow yet. So I love that. And then once the fly-in wraps, the next question is always, how are we measuring success? So what metrics or indicators do you use to measure the success or the impact of your fly-in after it's over?
So there are a couple of things that we do post-conference. What's interesting is even during the conference, so after each meeting, we have an app associated with our conference. And for each meeting, the attendee can rate how the meeting went, put takeaway notes from the meeting in there. And then there's even an auto situation where a scripted email template is set up to that, whether it was the scheduler or the staffer that sat in on the meeting. So they can automatically all right, let me customize it from my phone, send it off, and the thank you email is out and flushed. But we're getting that direct feedback after every meeting during the conference, which is really nice. I don't get to review it till, honestly, I take a few days after the conference too. So it's usually the next week, all right, let's dig through the pile, right? But we also do a member survey, which is really helpful. Just overall feeling that goes out the week, might not be the week, it might be because usually our fly-in, the hike the hill day, the meetings on the hill day, it's usually a Tuesday. So they're probably getting it on Friday, the survey. Like I said, I'm reviewing it that next week. But that's kind of our gauge for kind of knowing directly from participants how things went, how they felt about it. But if you're asking gauge from also the receiving end, for me, there's a lot of 435 offices. A lot of members to cover. I really do encourage during the webinar with our participants that part of the conversation be that they are also inviting the lawmaker to come visit their office if they're local. And so trying to follow up on that. We do have a question specific to that in the app. Did you get the ask in? So that way I know I can follow up with the office and see, is this should we try to do something, in St. Cloud, Minnesota, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right? That would be great. And I think from it kind of, right, it works on both sides, because if the member feels comfortable enough to really kind of push that, it creates an opportunity for me to kind of keep engaging and for them to keep engaging with the office. So, and I try to I would say the offices that we work with, majority of the time, right, we hone in on 4 committees specifically, right? House Financial Services, House Ways and Means, Senate Banking, Senate Finance. I try to make sure that there's a little bit of a touch base afterwards with all those key lawmakers to see how those meetings went on their side as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that the survey aspect is so smart too. I mean, we do a lot of surveys here, and that really helps drive all of our content moving forward too. So I love that you guys are really intentional about that. And I think that a lot of our members are trying to do that in general in their programs. So I think that that's really smart, because that's really where you're going to find out where that success landed.
And I highly recommend if other groups can and do work with vendors that allow for that technology in real time, walking out of the office to give feedback on the meeting. The post-conference survey is great, but that real time in the moment can be so helpful too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all forget stuff if we're not writing it down immediately, right? And then by the end of it, you're like, oh wait, I had all these meetings. What came out of it? So no, I love that real time opportunity. I think that's really, really good advice for other people that want to replicate this.
Yeah.
And then beyond the event itself, you also have like sustaining those relationships, and that's really where that long-term value happens. So I know that you talked about how you follow up, like you make sure that they did make the ask to visit in person, and then you also do your follow up as well. Is there anything else that is built during the fly-in that you continue to do throughout the year to strengthen those efforts?
Yeah, so through our grassroots, now mind you, it's a very busy year for any members who are in, running an election year cycle. So being able to do something back home sometimes can be challenging. We are working on trying to increase engagement back home. And I'm lucky that I would say our membership, right? Sometimes I just find out that they're doing it on their own and unprompted, right? Like, oh, I went by and visited, my member who represents, Rochester, New York, and we had a meeting. It was great. And like they'll reach out to me and I'm like, oh, wonderful. Okay. Like, let me know how I can be of assistance moving forward. But I will say, I think for what I'm personally putting in leading up to the fly-in, I actually, and it's been a big effort of mine since the beginning of this year, I've been having a ton of goodwill meetings on the Hill in preparation of just like, hey, our fly-in's coming up, like, this is our industry, this is who we are. We're so excited to be, to have everybody in DC sharing their local stories with you all. We want to be a resource as rules come up or policies proposed or hearings occur. And so kind of laying the foundation in advance. So that way too, when our members do go have these meetings, it's not the first time they're hearing about ELFA, and not the first time that they're hearing about some of those, as I mentioned, kind of those pillars that ground us.
Perfect. Yeah, that's so smart to start that ahead of time and then continue throughout the year. Because, like you say, as we get towards the election, it's just going to get so crazy for these members. They're not going to be able to prioritize it for sure.
Yeah.
And I know that you mentioned a little bit about this earlier about the importance of communication, which leads into storytelling. And in your experience, what role does storytelling or personal experience play in making these meetings with legislators super impactful?
So, and I always kind of lean back on my days being a Hill staffer. And there's nothing wrong with groups that come into DC, right? And they're heavy on the ass. They're trying to get straight to the point and go through the list. But it's funny being on the other side of it, right? My portfolio when I was on the Hill, I covered veteran affairs, agriculture trade, because my boss at the time was on House Foreign Affairs, postal issues, financial services policy, obviously. The issues, I managed my former boss was the founder of the Ports Caucus, right? So like that fell into my my portfolio as well. And so the issues are broad, and it's funny because these fly-ins would come in. Sometimes the groups were like 20 some people, and there is something to be said about that, right? I would imagine if you're a trade association that has groups taking meetings that are that large, it's more about the overall impact, right? Like strength in numbers. We're here to get this message across quickly, and we'd like a photo, and right. But I always felt like it was so tough to digest some of the asks, especially if I was on my fifth meeting of the day, right? And right before then had a meeting on like internally about what votes were going to be like that day on the Hill and advising my boss. And then so I'm pivoting from one subject matter to the next. And the group that came in would be like, oh, well, we'd like for your boss to sign on to HR 123. And this is why it's wonderful. And I'm sitting there like in my, sitting in that seat, it's like, okay, well, what's the hang up? Why are you looking for sponsors? What's the other side? And I honestly actually encourage groups to understand what the other side of the argument is, and kind of share it. That way you're sharing, giving that reference of like, and if you, frankly, I think if you can do that and then still make your case for why this is something that, the lawmakers should be supportive of, I think it goes a lot further. But with the storytelling specifically, when you can tie the impact to the district, to the state, not only for the staffer are you making sense of everything, but for the lawmaker specifically, right? Like he's there to represent the district, the state. And so maybe he's not an expert on Glass-Steagall or, Basel III, but the whether it's the economic impact, the jobs impact, the impact on the constituents, right? I think that resonates much more than kind of shelling out a lot of policy DC jargon and acronyms. And so really making clear what your business is doing locally. Like everything starts local. My colleague always says this, everything starts local. And I love when she uses that expression, because I really think that's how you move the needle policy wise, if you can share that local impact.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful reminder of what actually resonates versus, like you say, coming in just hot and heavy with the issues when you as a staffer has been bouncing around and that's all you do is bounce between the issues, because it's going to stand out in your mind at the end of the day, a personal story versus just more jargon about all the same topics that you've been looking into. So I think that that's great advice for these for sure. And our final question, when you're pulling all of this together, there's a lot of competing priorities that you're trying to manage, I'm sure. So how are you balancing the participant experience, your organizational goals, your legislative priorities? How do you manage all of that as you're planning your fly-in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really think everything starts with the participant experience. And if you nail that, you're nailing the other components, right? I love what I get to do. My job is protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution, your right to petition your government. It's such a unique job. And so having people come in for this fly-in, it just breathes life into either the department's goals, where we're taking our policy agenda. And so making sure that the members who are sharing these stories, carrying the torch, right? I think as long as that's a success and they feel like, once again, this was worth their time, and they see the value proposition in investing in advocacy, then everything else comes together.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really great insight and something that everybody needs to hear for what they need to focus on as they go into these. I love that mentality. Well, Allie, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. This was a really great look at how organizations can approach their fly-ins more strategically and make them way more impactful. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. If you found this conversation to be helpful, be sure to share and subscribe. And we will see you next time on Advocacy in Action.
Thanks, Brittany.